3 days before my wedding, I heard my fiancé promise his family that he would gain control of my savings. They discussed it in French while passing plates and smiling at me. His mother explained which documents I should sign after the honeymoon. His father warned him not to move too quickly. Then they mentioned another woman who still believed she was engaged to him. Hello, my name is Miranda Cole. I was 43 years old, and I had spent more than half my life serving in the United States Army. At the time of that dinner, I was a lieutenant colonel. I had lived through deployments, relocations, sleepless nights, and decisions where one mistake could destroy lives. I knew how to recognize danger when it wore an enemy uniform. I had never investigated the man sleeping beside me. I met Lucas 11 months before our wedding date. He worked as an international logistics consultant in Baltimore and often traveled to Canada and France. We met at a charity event supporting military veterans. He did not approach me with rehearsed compliments or dramatic stories. Instead, Lucas asked thoughtful questions and listened to my answers. He never pushed me to discuss combat operations. He remembered small details and respected the demands of my schedule. After dating men who treated my career like competition, his calmness felt different. It felt mature. For months later, Lucas moved into my house. At the time, the decision seemed practical. His lease was ending, and I often stayed late on base. My house stood in a quiet neighborhood outside Alexandria, Virginia. I had purchased it after my second overseas deployment. The mortgage was almost paid. Lucas often described the house as the place where we would build our future. What I did not understand was that he had already calculated its value. He proposed 7 months after we met. He took me to the Chesapeake Bay after an exhausting week at work. There were no photographers, crowds, or elaborate decorations. That simplicity made the proposal feel sincere. I accepted quickly, even though I rarely made emotional decisions. By then, I was tired of postponing my personal life. Military service had taught me to prepare for every possible risk. It had also taken years that I could never recover. Lucas appeared when I wanted to believe I had finally earned something simple. I wanted a stable home, a dependable partner, and a future that did not depend on new orders. The first warning signs appeared months before the wedding. I explained every one of them away. Whenever someone called from Canada, Lucas often left the room. Bank letters disappeared as soon as they entered the house. He guarded his phone carefully, although he never acted nervous. One afternoon, I noticed a transfer to a woman named Celine Marchand. Lucas told me she was a former colleague. According to him, his company was reimbursing her expenses through his account. The explanation did not make sense. I still chose not to investigate. Later, he suggested opening a joint account for wedding expenses. I deposited $20,000. Lucas promised to contribute the same amount. 2 weeks later, he had added only $4,000. He claimed the remaining money was delayed because a client had not paid him. I could have checked that story within minutes. Instead, I convinced myself that asking for proof would damage our relationship. That is how many people enter dangerous situations. They notice something wrong, but they fear looking suspicious more than being deceived. Lucas's family arrived from Montreal 4 days before the wedding. His father, Gerard, had spent years working in real estate. His mother, Marie, managed a small travel agency. His younger sister, Amélie, came with them. From the moment we met, Amélie seemed uncomfortable. She rarely held eye contact and constantly checked her phone. Lucas had warned me that his family spoke French at home. He even joked that their private conversations might bore me. I never told him that I understood French. Years earlier, the Army had assigned me to Djibouti, where I worked with French military officers. Later, I spent 7 months at a NATO headquarters. My French was not perfect, but I understood names, dates, financial terms, and ordinary conversation. That was more than enough. The family dinner took place at an expensive restaurant near the Potomac River. Lucas's parents greeted me warmly. They complimented my dress and asked polite questions in English. Everything looked normal. After the first course, they switched to French. At first, they discussed the flight, the hotel, and the weather. Then Marie asked when Lucas would gain access to my primary bank account. For a moment, I wondered whether I had misunderstood. Then Lucas answered clearly. He told her that he could not rush me. Gerard advised him to wait until we returned from our honeymoon. After the wedding, Lucas planned to convince me to refinance my house. The money would be invested in a family real estate project. They were talking about an apartment complex in Quebec. Lucas had told me that his father sold that property years earlier. The truth was very different. His family owed several banks more than $400,000. Part of the property faced foreclosure. My house was supposed to save them. Marie worried that I might ask for a prenuptial agreement. Lucas assured her that I had never mentioned one. He was correct. I believed a legal contract would insult the man I intended to marry. Then Amélie mentioned Céline. Her name changed the entire conversation. Céline had grown impatient. She wanted her money returned and threatened to contact me before the wedding. Lucas told his family that he had everything under control. Once he had access to my money, he planned to pay Céline and make the problem disappear. Marie then asked whether Céline still believed they were engaged. Lucas answered without hesitation. He said Céline believed whatever she needed to believe. That sentence removed every remaining doubt. I was not the woman he loved. I was a financial solution. Céline was probably another solution. There might have been women before both of us. My pulse accelerated, but my expression remained calm. 20 years in uniform had taught me not to reveal the moment I understood an opponent's plan. I kept eating, although I could no longer taste the food. Lucas touched my hand and smiled at me. His father suggested ordering another bottle of wine. Everyone at that table believed my money already belonged to them. They were so confident in my ignorance that they never lowered their voices. The hardest part was remaining seated. I wanted to stand, overturn my glass, and force Lucas to explain every sentence. Anger would have felt satisfying. It also would have given him time to destroy evidence. So I waited. Before the server brought the check, Marie returned to the documents. She reminded Lucas that the power of attorney needed to cover both my accounts and my property. I placed my napkin beside my plate. Then I spoke to them in French. I calmly told them that I understood their entire plan. I informed them that the wedding was canceled. Finally, I made it clear that they would never touch my money. No one at the table moved. Amélie lowered her eyes first. Gerard froze with his wine glass still in his hand. Marie turned pale. Lucas stared at me as if he were seeing me clearly for the first time. I did not wait for an explanation. I left enough cash to cover my dinner, picked up my purse, and walked outside. Lucas followed me toward the parking lot. I did not stop. Any conversation would have turned into denial, tears, excuses, and new lies. During the drive home, I called my attorney, Daniel. We had served together early in our military careers. After leaving the army, he built a legal practice focused on financial crimes. I explained what happened and asked him to help secure my accounts. My next call went to the bank. The joint wedding account was frozen immediately. Using my phone, I removed Lucas from the home security system and changed every access code. Then I contacted my neighbor, who kept a spare key. She agreed to meet me outside the house. Lucas had not arrived when I returned. His clothes, laptop, and briefcase were still inside. Daniel warned me not to search private property without legal guidance. He told me to photograph only documents left openly visible. A folder containing our honeymoon papers sat on the kitchen counter. Beneath the airline tickets, I found a copy of a loan application. Lucas was listed as the primary borrower. I was listed as the co-borrower. The signature beneath my name looked similar to mine, but I had never signed it. The loan amount was $180,000. My house was listed as collateral. The application was not complete, but the verification process had already started. Someone had given the lender copies of my tax returns, military compensation records, and pension projections. Those files had been stored in a locked drawer inside my office. The lock showed no damage. Lucas knew where I kept the key. At the bottom of the folder, I found a life insurance application. 1 month before our wedding, Lucas had applied for a policy on my life. He had named himself as the beneficiary. The application had not received final approval. However, my personal information had already been submitted. That discovery changed the situation completely. The man sleeping beside me had collected documents about my income, my property, and my death. Maybe the insurance policy had an innocent explanation. After the restaurant, I could no longer afford innocent explanations. Lucas returned 20 minutes later. His parents arrived with him. They stopped outside the house, but none of them could enter. I remained inside. Through the security cameras, I watched Lucas call, knock, and pace along the driveway. Messages arrived one after another. At first, he described the conversation as a misunderstanding. Then he accused me of interfering in private family business. Later, he reminded me of our relationship and everything we had planned. When that failed, he mentioned my reputation. He reminded me that guests were already traveling to the wedding. A few hours earlier, those words might have opened the door. I feared scandal, gossip, and the humiliation of canceling a ceremony. Now humiliation seemed cheaper than marrying a fraud. Lucas eventually tried the old garage code. That was when I called the police. The officers told him he could collect his belongings later at an agreed time. His family returned to their hotel. I stayed in the house with my neighbor. Sleep never came. By 3 in the morning, I was reviewing every joint expense. $12,000 had disappeared from the wedding account. The transfers appeared to be deposits for a photographer, catering company, and transportation service. None of those businesses existed. The addresses led to private mailboxes. Every listed phone number had been disconnected. Daniel returned the next morning with a digital security specialist. We changed my passwords, examined my credit history, and reported possible identity theft. The review revealed 2 additional loan applications. One had been rejected because the signature did not match. The other remained under consideration. Several hours later, I learned Lucas had opened a credit card in my name. The balance already exceeded $31,000. Some charges came from hotels in Montreal. Other payments had gone directly to Celine Marchand. Daniel located her through public business records. She worked as an administrator at a dental clinic in Quebec. Celine rarely shared personal photographs online. However, her sister's account contained a picture from 2 years earlier. Celine stood beside Lucas with one hand resting on his shoulder. An engagement ring was clearly visible on her finger. Relatives had filled the comments with congratulations. The photograph had been posted 7 months before Lucas met me. That was when I understood the true scale of his deception. Lucas was not simply hiding an affair. He was living 2 separate lives. He had promised marriage to 2 women in different countries. One woman waited for him to solve his financial problems. The other was already paying to solve them. Contacting Celine was not an easy decision. She might have known about me. She might even have participated in the plan. However, staying silent could leave her exposed to further damage. Daniel sent an official message from his office. He asked her to contact him concerning Lucas's financial activities. Celine responded 40 minutes later. The following morning, we spoke through a video call. I did not see a rival. I saw an exhausted woman realizing that 5 years of her life had been stolen. Lucas met her while working in Montreal. He proposed marriage, then repeatedly delayed the wedding because of his father's debts. Over several years, Celine gave him almost $70,000. She sold her car, used a personal credit line, and borrowed money from her sister. Lucas told her that he was purchasing part of the family apartment complex. Once the investment became profitable, they planned to buy a home together. The reality was much darker. Part of her money paid Lucas's personal debts. The rest helped him appear successful while dating me. Celine had purchased the watch he wore during my proposal. The deposit for our wedding venue came from her credit line. Lucas purchased my engagement ring using the credit card opened in my name. The precision of the plan made me feel physically sick. Every romantic detail had been financed by someone he deceived. Even the charity event where we met had not been accidental. Lucas learned about me through a contractor he knew. Before approaching me, he knew my rank, estimated income, and home ownership status. He had reviewed my professional profile before our first conversation. I had been selected in advance. That truth hurt more than the canceled wedding. I had always trusted my ability to evaluate people. Yet I allowed a fraud to study my loneliness and use it against me. Lucas understood that pressure would make me suspicious. He only needed to listen, remain patient, and wait for me to open every door myself. The next 2 days became an investigation. The wedding was canceled. Vendors were notified. Guests received a short message explaining that the ceremony would not take place because of a serious breach of trust. I did not invent an illness. I did not hide behind an emergency. Some people called immediately. Others demanded details that I was not ready to share. I turned off my phone. Meanwhile, Lucas began controlling the story. He told people that military stress had caused me to suffer an emotional breakdown. According to his version, I misunderstood the French conversation because of trauma. The purpose was obvious. He wanted everyone to question my stability. He forgot that documents do not become emotional. The loan applications, forged signature, transfers, and insurance records were already with investigators. Celine provided bank statements and years of messages. In several messages, Lucas promised to repay her after completing a business arrangement in Virginia. He described me as an investor who did not understand every detail. That same day, a federal investigator contacted me about a third woman. Her name was Rachel. She lived in Pennsylvania and worked as a nurse. 3 years earlier, Lucas borrowed $26,000 from her. He claimed his father needed emergency surgery. After receiving the money, he slowly disappeared. Rachel contacted the police, but there was not enough evidence to prove fraud. Lucas returned a small portion and described the situation as a failed private loan. Now her experience formed part of a larger pattern. Lucas's family denied participating. Gerard claimed the restaurant conversation concerned a legitimate investment. Marie insisted she knew nothing about the other women. Amélie remained silent for nearly a week. Then she contacted investigators. She admitted the family knew about Celine. Her parents told her that Lucas had ended the engagement, but Celine refused to accept the breakup. Amélie learned about me 2 months before the wedding. Her parents explained that my marriage to Lucas would save the family property. They described the money as temporary assistance that Lucas would eventually repay. Amélie agreed to stay silent. During the dinner, she realized Lucas intended to obtain the money using forged documents. Her testimony proved the conversation was not a joke. It was not a cultural misunderstanding. It was a plan. Lucas was arrested 11 days after the wedding was canceled. He was attempting to fly to Paris through New York. Inside his luggage, investigators found 2 phones, copies of my documents, and $20,000 in cash. They later discovered that some of the cash came from wedding refunds. Lucas had canceled several services and directed the refunds to another account. Even after being exposed, he continued taking everything he could. The legal process lasted almost a year. During that time, every room in my house carried a memory. The kitchen table reminded me where Lucas completed loan applications. The bedroom reminded me that I had slept beside a stranger. My office filled me with shame because of one poorly secured key. For several months, I considered selling the house. Eventually, I understood that leaving would allow Lucas to take one more thing. Instead, I changed the locks and repainted the walls. I removed every piece of furniture we had selected together. The empty rooms slowly began to feel like mine again. The bank eventually recognized the credit card as fraudulent. The loan applications were blocked before any money was released. Some wedding funds were recovered after accounts were frozen. The remaining money was gone. Recovering financially was easier than trusting my judgment again. At work, I began checking every detail too aggressively. Small mistakes felt like deliberate attempts to deceive me. Friends noticed that I was withdrawing from them. Eventually, I met with a military psychologist. For years, I believed professional help was for people unable to manage their own lives. I learned that independence can quietly become isolation. Therapy forced me to face an uncomfortable truth. Lucas had not exploited weakness. He exploited my need to appear strong. I avoided questions because I feared looking jealous. I ignored financial concerns because I did not want to seem controlling. I stayed silent because I wanted to prove that I could maintain a normal relationship. Lucas built his trap from my best intentions. During the trial, he admitted to some of the charges. His attorneys described everything as a series of reckless financial decisions. The evidence showed something else. 3 women, several forged documents, and Amelie's testimony revealed a deliberate pattern. Lucas was convicted of fraud, identity theft, and attempting to obtain a loan illegally. Gerard also faced charges for helping prepare the documents. Marie reached an agreement with prosecutors and provided financial records. Celine recovered only part of her money. Rachel recovered almost nothing. No court could return the years they lost. After the trial, Lucas sent me a letter. He claimed that his feelings had been real. He wrote that he intended to fix everything after stabilizing the family business. I read the letter once. In the past, those words might have made me search for the man I believed I loved. Now I recognized the same pattern. He wanted to be judged by his intentions rather than his actions. I never responded. Several months later, I met Celine in Washington. She had traveled there to provide additional testimony and agreed to meet for coffee. We did not spend much time discussing Lucas. What mattered was seeing each other clearly. We were not rivals. We were 2 women placed on opposite sides of the same lie. Celine began repaying her debts and moved in with her sister. Rachel later wrote that the trial helped her stop blaming herself. Amelie ended contact with her parents. Her testimony strengthened the case, but it destroyed her family. She was the hardest person for me to forgive. One anonymous message could have warned me months earlier. At the same time, I understood that her family had trained her to remain silent. Forgiveness did not erase her choices. It simply meant I no longer wanted to carry all of them inside my mind. A year and a half after the canceled wedding, I received a new assignment. It was not an escape. Before leaving, I hosted a small dinner inside the same house. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues gathered around my table. They were the people who remained when everything else collapsed. No one spoke a language they assumed I could not understand. No one calculated the value of my house. No one counted my money. There was no ring on my finger, but I no longer felt empty. That evening, I understood something I had missed before. The most dangerous lies rarely begin with a large demand. First, someone asks you to ignore one small detail. Then they suggest that asking questions might ruin the moment. Eventually, they use your trust as proof that you agreed to everything. I did not stop believing in people. I stopped confusing trust with refusing to see facts. The wedding that never happened once felt like the greatest humiliation of my life. Now I see it differently. It was an operation I escaped 1 minute before the trap closed. Knowing French did not save me. What saved me was the moment I stopped explaining someone else's lies with my own love. Sometimes I still remember that dinner. I remember the smiles, the wine, and the calm voices around the table. They believed my uniform made me predictable. They believed loneliness made me vulnerable. Most of all, they believed love would keep me silent. They were wrong about one thing. I could forgive what they had done, but I would never allow them to do it again.